Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Chase for the Championship. I am Chris Clark. It's week 2 of the college basketball season. We are already seeing some big games, big wins. Oh, man, some huge surprises. Let's get right to it, shall we? Well, in our first game of the week, Florida State bounced back in a huge way after a loss to Pitt. They came back, went on the road, took on Florida, took out Florida, I should say 6th ranked Florida, 63-51. Right now, let's go to WMBB's Courtney Mims, who covers the Seminoles and joins us now. And Courtney, I got to ask, I know teams say, yeah, we're going on the road, we're going to get a W, but really, did anybody see this coming?
Honestly, Chris, I don't believe anyone saw this coming. That's why it's the game of the week. That's why all of social media was talking about this game. And I honestly think a tweet from FSU Hoops said it best. Was number 6 the ranking of the Gators, or how many consecutive wins we have over them? Because the Noles now have 6 consecutive wins over the Gators. Pretty impressive and dominant win, and definitely one of the best games of last week.
Oh, man, I got to say, I love the rivalries, especially that FSU-Florida Gator rivalry. Now, I'm looking at these stats here. Florida shot just 14 of 50 from the field, 16 turnovers. Am I reading that right? That's incredible. How important was that Florida State defense?
Well, honestly, if I had an MVP award to give out for this game, it would go to the Florida State defense. They knew what they had to do coming into this one, and that was take out one of UF's best offensive players, Kerry Blackshear. He was the one who was going to give them problems, and they double-teamed him the entire game. They held him to just 10 points. 10 points. All of those coming from the free-throw line. So, honestly, they did exactly what they needed to do. When taking him out, they left the Gators to their rest of the talent on the court, which just couldn't do it against the Noles in this one.
All right, you don't win a game 0-0. Obviously, that defense was nasty. But which players stood out on offense? They didn't break the century mark, but they were opportunistic, it seems.
Yeah, honestly, Chris, I thought the best offensive player for the Noles would be senior leader Trent Forrest. We obviously saw him a lot in that game against Pitt. He was the leading scorer for that one, but some of their younger talents stepped up for this one. Devin Vassell, sophomore player for the Noles, he stepped up in a really big way. He led the team with 13 points in that game, and obviously we didn't see much of him from last year as he was a freshman, didn't play a whole lot. But this year he knew he had to step up with this young Noles team, and he definitely did that. I think we'll see a lot more from him in the rest of the coming season.
No, definitely looking forward to that. Now, I know FSU lost to Pitt in that opener, but, I mean, you beat a top 10 team. You'd expect to get a little bit of love in the polls. They didn't crack the top 25. Do you think they should be there?
Oh, I definitely think they should be there. I was honestly surprised they didn't crack the top 25. Like you said, Chris, how does beating one of the top 10 teams in college basketball right now not get you into that top 25 ranking? Now, I think the Noles still have to prove themselves, and I think that's why they didn't crack the top 25. They need to get a couple more wins under their belt in order to show up in those rankings, but I think they can do that. They've obviously shown that the haters are wrong and that they can do it this season. I think we'll see them in a big way coming up throughout the rest of the year.
Now, they got that first home game coming up there. I know the place is going to be rowdy, but what kind of a game are we expecting against Western Carolina out of these Seminoles here?
Honestly, I think the awesomeness of the win over their rivals hasn't quite worn off for this team just yet. So I think they get a lot of confidence boost going into this game against Western Carolina. Now, Western Carolina did lose to Georgia at the beginning of the season, so they're not a bad team, I would say, but I definitely think the Noles have a win over this team coming up on Friday. But we'll see. Anything can happen in college basketball. We saw that against Florida on Sunday, and we could see that throughout the rest of the season. Anything can happen.
Thank you very much. WMBB's Courtney Mims, everybody. Thank you. Meanwhile, Duke up to number 2 in the rankings this week. They could be number 1 next week after Kentucky's loss to Evansville Tuesday night. The Blue Devils, they kept that momentum rolling after their win over Kansas in New York City. They beat Colorado State 89-55 on Friday and then rolled over Central Arkansas 105-54 Tuesday night. Those were the Blue Devils' first 2 home games of the season. Guard Trey Jones led the way for Duke against Colorado State. 15 points, dished out 8 assists. And against Colorado State, Matthew Hurt paced the Blue Devils, scored 19 points off the bench Vernon Carey Jr. had a double-double, 17 and 10 boards in just 20 minutes on the floor. That is some production. The Blue Devils say that balance, oh man, that's exciting.
You know, certainly that's one aspect of it. More so, it's just everyone has to be prepared and confident knowing that you can be called on to start at any moment. And so I think the biggest thing is, keeping guys' egos in the same place where, if you're coming off the bench, don't let it hurt your confidence. Know that you're still the same player that we'd expect you to be if you started the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think last year was a team in its own, but I think this year we're definitely a more balanced team. And, we have more guys that are capable of coming in off the bench or being a starter and having a hot night. And I think that helps us because, we're capable of bringing guys off the bench with fresh legs, and we're more capable of rotating guys in, especially if somebody gets hurt or somebody gets tired.
Trey Jones left the game against Central Arkansas after taking a hit to the head, but he's expected to be back for the Blue Devils. Next game, that's Friday night against Georgia State. Then Duke is headed back to New York City to take on the Cal Golden Bears in the Empire Classic. That's next Thursday night at 9. Meanwhile, Louisville moved up to 4th in the rankings and kept things rolling with 2 lopsided wins at the KFC Yum Center. Still love that place. WEHT's Randall Parmley keeping an eye on the Cardinals for us.
Well, a pretty good week for the number 4 team in the nation. Louisville Cardinals picked up a couple of home wins, a couple of games in which, in all honesty, the Cardinals were never really challenged. It was all Louisville Sunday at the Yum Center, beating Youngstown State 78-55. Louisville hit their first 11 shots of the game. Jordan Wara scored 21. Stephen Enoch added 17 and a career-high 14 rebounds. Nice game for Darius Perry as well. He dished out a career-best 12 assists. And then last night, another blowout on the banks of the Ohio as the Cards rolled past Indiana State 91-62. It was another big night for Wara with 21 points again. Louisville was red hot. Get this, they shot 58.5% for the game. And check this out, a blistering 52.9% from 3, going 9 for 17 behind the arc. Now, up next for Louisville, the Cards will have 2 more home games against North Carolina Central and South Carolina Upstate. Covering the Louisville Cardinals, I'm Randall Parmley.
Thanks a lot there, Randall. Close look at those 2 upcoming games for the Cards. Like you said, NC Central Sunday evening at 5. That one should be a good one for them. And then South Carolina Upstate, that's Wednesday at 7. Defending champion, the Virginia Cavaliers. They broke into the top 10 this week. WRIC's Natalie Calabat heard from head coach Tony Bennett after his team's big win over James Madison. Natalie?
The Virginia Cavaliers are off to a 2-0 start after defeating in-state rival James Madison on Sunday 65-34. UVA broke the game open in the second half, and as usual, they did it with defense, holding JMU with just 11 points. Still, Coach Tony Bennett says it's too early to judge his team's performance as a whole.
Too small of a sample size. I know we have to play good defense. That's, as I told them before the game, it's not always going to be pretty, but it has to be gritty. That's kind of as we were using that and just say, there's so many possessions in a game, and the defense has to hold you in there when, shots aren't falling or you're not as adept right now offensively.
Mamadi Diakite led the Hoos in scoring for the second straight game, putting in 19 points to go with 13 rebounds and 2 blocks. Braxton Key also finished with a double-double of 14 points and 10 rebounds. And Jay Huff once again was a spark off the bench with 11 points. The easy win also allows Bennett to boost the confidence of some of his younger guys.
You can't be afraid when you have an open shot to shoot. I just want him to play the game. We sometimes get so obsessed with the shot, this and that. It's just good for them to be out there, and I like to see them make good basketball plays on both ends.
All right, with their victories, the Cavaliers moved up from 11th to 9th in this week's AP poll. Virginia will remain home for the next 2 games, taking on Columbia at noon on Saturday and Vermont next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Covering Virginia, I'm Natalie Calabat.
All right, thanks a lot there, Natalie. And after their opening night win over Notre Dame, UNC hit the road to take on UNC Wilmington out on the coast. Now, it wasn't a blowout, but this one never really looked in doubt. And the Tar Heels came home with a 78-62 W. Cole Anthony had another big game and another double-double, racking up 20 points and 10 rebounds. Justin Pierce also had a big game off the bench, getting a double-double of his own, 18 points, 12 rebounds. That is sweet. Big concern in this one, freshman forward Armando Beckett went down injured early. He would not return, and there's no timeline on when he might be back. We asked head coach Roy Williams today, though, if Cole Anthony could be quite possibly the best point guard he's ever coached.
So to me, it's way too early to say something like that. But as I've said, I think he's the most complete, and he doesn't have any tremendous weakness. His shot's got to be better, but there's no tremendous weakness out there, and we'll wait and see what happens. But I'm not ready to say that yet, and I hope yet is the appropriate word.
He's a really special player. Obviously, the talent kind of speaks for itself, and you guys saw that Wednesday night against Notre Dame. Then also, I think he's a great leader for a freshman. His game is really mature, and he just makes the right play, which is something that's really impressive for a freshman.
The Tar Heels should be well rested when they take the court at the Dean Dome tomorrow night against Gardner-Webb. That game tips at 9. UNC will then welcome in-state rivals Elon to Chapel Hill on Wednesday night at 8:30. Meanwhile, Virginia Tech, one of 4 3-0 teams in the conference. Jermaine Farrell from WFXR covering the Hokies.
Well, we last talked about the Virginia Tech Hokies right here on the chase for the championship. The Hokies were coming off an ACC opening win at Clemson. This past week, Tech had a pair of non-conference games at the crib. The first one was last Friday as the Hokies had their Castle Coliseum season opener against Coppin State. Naheem Aline scored a game-high 18 points. Virginia Tech got off to a fast start and cruising past Coppin State 74-42. Tech built a 27-3 lead in the first 12 minutes and 15 seconds of the game, hitting 4 triples in the first 3 minutes. And with the victory, the Hokies moved to 2-0 on the season. Then last night, Tech played in their 800th game at Castle Coliseum as they hosted USC Upstate. And with 23 points from Landers Nolly II, Tech, they went to 3-0 with an 80-57 win. Tech lighting it up from downtown, hitting 13 of 27 shots from three-point range. And here are the thoughts from head coach Mike Young about last night's game.
You know, we out-rebounded Clemson. We out-rebounded our second opponent. I think they competed. I thought we did a better job in the second half. But, if we expect to win a number of games, needless to say, we're going to have to do a better job in that regard. Eight offensive rebounds against, someone in our league would prove to be costly, needless to say.
All right, folks, now next up, Virginia Tech, the Hokies. They stay at Castle Coliseum for a pair of games. On Saturday at 1:30 in the afternoon, Tech will play Lehigh. Then next Wednesday night at 7, they host Delaware State. Covering the Virginia Tech Hokies, I'm Jermaine Farrell.
All right, thanks a lot there, Jermaine. And after dropping their first game of the season in overtime, no less, to Georgia Tech at home, NC State bounced back with not 1 but 2 wins. Let's bring in WNCN's Todd Gibson. Todd, the Wolfpack man got a huge boost from the return of one of their star players.
That's right, Chris. Big is the key word there. 6'10" DJ Funderburk has been set free back from suspension. Funderburk played his first game last night. He scored 11 points, added 7 rebounds, while giving redshirt freshman Manny Bates a breather, and that will be important going forward. Now, after the game, I caught up with Funderburk, who, as you might imagine, was thankful to be back.
Man, like when you get it taken away from you, you realize it's a blessing and a privilege to be out there with your family. So it was definitely a wake-up call and something that I appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting him back takes a little bit of pressure off of Manny. Whether we want to realize it or not, Manny's a freshman. Even though he was here, he didn't play last year as a redshirt freshman. So we get more of a veteran guy that can. And Manny's and DJ's a really good offensive rebounder. So he takes a lot of pressure off Manny, where there's so much of a learning curve right now. I brought him back because he's done everything that I've asked. I've said this all along. If you want to be a part of NC State basketball, then you've got to do all of the right stuff, or I'm going to hold you accountable for it. And DJ's checked all the boxes that I've asked, and we're excited that he's back.
I believe Coach when he says he's going to hold people accountable, especially. Now, last night's game against Florida International tied at halftime, man, but C.J. Bryce came up big in the second with 12 of his 16 to lead the way. How important is the pride of North Mech to this team down the stretch?
I'll tell you what, he's very important. It's his senior year, and he wants to go out with a bang, just like Torin Dorn did last year. Ironically, Bryce has kind of slid into Dorn's position, small forward, a spot that gets a whole lot of touches. And so far, Bryce is delivering, hitting those all-important 10 to 15-footers. Bryce leads the team in scoring at just under 20 points per game. And, Chris, he has been really, really good.
I bet. Tell me, do you see any problems for the next 2 games with the Wolfpack's opponents coming up here at PNC Arena there?
No, not at all. Shouldn't be a problem at all. St. Francis, Brooklyn, and Alcorn State. But the interesting thing about those games are where they are being played. Both will be at Reynolds Coliseum, and what a basketball venue that is. 5,000 fans packed in. The players and the fans absolutely love playing at Reynolds Coliseum. Chris, you need to go see a game there. It is just amazing.
I was going to say we need to make plans right now. I definitely got to go check that one out. Thanks a lot, Todd. Appreciate it. We'll check back in with you in the weeks to come. Moving on here. After a busy start to the season, Clemson is in the middle of an entire week off. As WSBA's Pete Yannity reports, that's given the Tigers some much-needed practice time.
The Clemson Tigers have won 2 straight on the strength of a come-from-behind victory against Colgate on Sunday, in which the Tigers got a 13-point win and had 4 players in double figures, led by Tevin Mack, the former Alabama and Texas Longhorn, with 17 points, and Alamir Dawes, a highly regarded freshman guard, chipping in 16. Then, after that Sunday game, the Tigers with a full week off before they welcomed Detroit Mercy to Little John Coliseum. But for a ball club with so many new faces, that's probably the best thing that could have happened for them.
Being a young team, it's a very rough week for us. A lot of the guys, with the freshmen coming in, besides only a few of us, never played 3 games in a week like that against tough opponents. And I think it was just really big for us to have this week. So now that we got 3 games under our belt, going into next week, we got a whole week until we play again on Sunday. And it gives us a chance to kind of decompress, learn from what we did this past week, and then just going forward, just learn from those mistakes and apply them to the game.
Something Tigers head coach Brad Brownell is happy about, especially with such a young backcourt on the squad this year. The turnovers. They had just 12 against Colgate, and that's right about their season average so far. Covering the Clemson Tigers, I'm Pete Yannity.
Thanks a lot, Pete. The Tigers, like I said, got that whole week off between games. They'll take the floor to Little John Coliseum next on Sunday afternoon at 3. All right, looking at our second game of the week, the Wake Forest Demon Deacons got their first win of the season in dramatic fashion on a last-second shot to beat Columbia. Now, joining us now to take a closer look at this is WGHP's Danny Harden. Danny, I know all wins are big, but, man, how big was this to the Demon Deacs this season?
It was nice to get that first win, especially the way they did it, last-second shot by Brandon Childress. But if you ask the Deacon players, what do you feel like after this win? They're going to be honest with you and say, hey, we're playing a team like Columbia in our own arena. We should be winning this game by double digits. But, hey, a win's a win, and they went out and got another one against Asheville a few days after that. Always
a nice one. Now, Brandon Childress made that last-second shot there, and I know he leads the team in minutes. How big of a leader is he on that team, and how crucial is he to that team's success? Well, Brandon Childress has been around this franchise at Wake Forest for a long, long time, and he's kind of like a coach out there on the court, which makes a lot of sense because his dad, Randolph Childress, is a longtime assistant coach at Wake Forest. But at the end of that Columbia game, the game was tied, time winding down. Pretty much the game plan is simple. Give the ball to Brandon Childress and everybody get the heck out of the way. And that's what happened. And the ball bounced on the rim, boing, 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 about 4 times, and it went in. But the Deacons knew that Brandon would come through in the clutch.
I knew he's built for that moment, and he says it himself. He's born for that moment. So I knew what it was going to be, and I knew that outcome. I knew he was going to hit the shot. I had total confidence in our team captain, so it was just good to see it play out.
3-2-1 going down. I practiced that shot a lot. Man, just fight. And you fight, you amazing what happens. And we kept fighting. We just got to have that dog mentality, and we came out victorious.
You know what else I liked about Brandon is he admitted if he hit his free throws down the stretch in that game, they would have never been in that position. So definitely the sign of a true leader. Moving on, I want to ask you about Chaundee Brown. Now, he has led the team in points the last 2 games, and it was great the package we saw on him where he was interviewing all of his players. How big of a leader is he on that team? Well, Chaundee Brown is so much more outgoing than Brandon Childress is. Brandon's kind of quiet, but Brown, he's out there. He'll do anything. He'll have fun. He'll have a lot of fun. But they're getting some big-time play out of Brown so far. He's averaging 17 points, 11 rebounds a game. And think about that. He's a guard averaging 11 rebounds a game. He's 6'5". He's got good size, great athlete. But, again, he's playing some pretty good ball. They expect big things out of him this year. Not afraid to get his hands dirty, stick his face in the fan. That's for sure. Now, they had a rough start to the season. That loss to Boston College. Now, for the people that might not be able to see them all the time, what adjustments have they made to rattle off the couple of wins that they have here?
Well, think about that loss to Boston College. Wake Forest coming into this season predicted to finish last in the ACC. So you look at the ACC schedule, how are they going to get wins against a Duke, a Carolina, or Virginia and teams like that? So they look at games like Boston College, well, we need those wins, and they didn't get it. And that was very disappointing to start the season like that. But a couple of things they've had to adjust is they've lost not one but two 6'8" players that they were expecting a lot from this season down low. Olivia Sarr is the only guy that's going to get minutes for the Deacons, quality minutes, that weighs over 220 pounds. So think about that. You're a college team. You got to play small ball. Danny Manning's going to have to adjust here. They're going to play small ball, but you know what? The good news is they have some pretty good guards. So maybe the small ball situation will work the rest of the year.
Just maybe be on the lookout for it. Now, they travel down to Charlotte, a team that's surprised a few folks with the big W they put up. How's this thing going to break down in your eyes for Wake Forest?
Yeah, you look at this Wake Forest schedule and you think, oh, we'll go to Charlotte and get that win easily. But Charlotte just beat Davidson. So this is not going to be an easy game for Wake Forest. And, I mean, really, if you look at the entire schedule for Wake Forest, they're going to have to bring their A game every time out because they don't have those high school All-Americans up and down the roster like you say a Duke or a Carolina like they possess. So every game, Danny Manning's group, they need to bring their A game every single time out on the court.
Oh, he always did talk about max effort with his crew there. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it there.
You got it.
And Syracuse, man, they just got shut down by Virginia in their first game of the season. But as WSYR's Darius Joshua reports, the Orange bounced back big to get their first win of the year.
What a difference a week makes. It doesn't hurt to play a different opponent as well. Syracuse doubles its point production against Colgate to grab its first win of the season. There were a lot of heroes in this game. Buddy Boeheim led the team in scoring. Barama Sidibe had a double-double, and Elijah Hughes had a career-high 8 assists as the overall offense looked better for SU. But the players said it was the other side of the ball that sparked it all.
And I'll start with defense. I think we had 2-3 steals in a row at that one point to get it to 41-28. And, you know, Ron was running the court well, and we were giving him a lob. And, you know, it was just a lot of fun from there on out. We were playing with intensity and really stepping it up on the defensive end.
I mean, that's when we have fun. You know, we get stops, and you see me had a lob to Brahma, and then Rex showed some, Magic Johnson kind of flared and went and dunked it. So after we get stops, we have our fun.
You know, our defense has been playing pretty well. So I think we got out a lot more in transition today. We had a lot of rebounds, a lot of steals, and I think that's what helped it as well is, you know, get to the hoop in transition.
I thought we moved the ball. We looked for people. They're passing the ball. They're moving the ball. We've got to just get better at it, and which is really where we should be right at this stage.
This is the 54th straight win over the Raiders, which is the longest active streak against any opponent in NCAA history. There will be at least one roster change when the non-conference schedule continues against Seattle on Saturday. Coach Jim Boeheim saying that freshman Joe Girard III will get his first career start at point guard instead of Jalen Carey. Covering Syracuse, I'm Darius Joshua.
Good stuff, Darius. The Orange will stay at home, like you said, for the next 2 games next week. They're going to take on the Seattle Redhawks Saturday night at 7. And then on Wednesday, Cornell Big Red heads to Syracuse for a 7:30 tip-off. Boston College off to a 3-0 start after beating Wake Forest on opening night. The Eagles nearly doubled up High Point last night, beating the Panthers 59-33. That comes after Boston College took a trip down to Tampa to take on South Florida. The Eagles left the Sunshine State with a 74-60 victory. Derek Thornton led the way in that one, scoring 22 points for the Eagles. It could be a tough test for BC on Saturday afternoon when Belmont heads to Conti Forum at 2. The Bruins made the NCAA tournament last season, and then it's a battle of Eagles next Wednesday when BC hosts Eastern Washington at 7. Been kind of an up and down week for the Pitt Panthers after their opening night win at Florida State. The Panthers helped open up the new stadium at Robert Morris on Tuesday night. They spoiled the Colonials party with a 71-57 win. Guard Trey McGowan's led the way for Pitt with 25 and played 37 out of a total 40 minutes. That is an iron man. But it was a different story last Saturday. Pittsburgh lost 75-70 to Nicholls State. And it's a big one coming up. Tomorrow night, Panthers taking on West Virginia. Yeah, that's right. Backyard brawl. Big test for both teams. That game tips off at 7. After a weekend to rest up and make adjustments, Pitt will host Monmouth on Monday night at 7. Keeping this thing moving along here. Georgia Tech, they didn't show any signs of fatigue after their overtime win at NC State. The Yellow Jackets beat up on Elon 64-51. WJBF's Brendan Robertson taking a closer look at Tech's first home game of the year.
The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets are 2-0 on the young season after a 64-41 win over Elon on the Flats Monday night. Sophomore Michael DeVoe tying his career high with 22 points, including 3 of 4 shooting from downtown. But this was all about defense for the Yellow Jackets. They held the Phoenix to just 22% shooting from the floor. That's the lowest percentage for a Tech opponent in school history. And they held one of the best three-point shooting teams to just 10% from deep.
Really proud of our guys' defensive effort. I thought we really guarded at a high level. That's who we are, what we do, what we're about. You know, we had to really guard at a high level against a team that came in 5th in the country in three-point shooting. So really proud of our defensive intensity.
We always want to stay locked in on defense no matter what, no matter how our offense is going, or no matter how the game is going. We always want to stay locked in our defense. That's our game plan, and that's our culture. So we have to stay locked in on that. So, and then we eventually found our offense during the game. So then came to that.
Up next for Georgia Tech, a big one. They will travel to Athens on Wednesday to take on the Georgia Bulldogs, the 196th all-time meeting between the two rivals. The Dogs are 2-0 as well on the strength of freshman sensation Anthony Ant-Man Edwards. 7 p.m. tip-off in Stegman Coliseum. With the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, I'm Brendan Robertson. Back to you.
I'm loving teams with nicknames. Yes, that one's great. Georgia Tech obviously taking on Georgia there next at 7. That game also between Georgia and Georgia Tech. I love the name of it. Clean old-fashioned hate. Nothing better. Yeah, that's right. Notre Dame dropped a tough one to Chapel Hill, UNC on opening night, but they bounced back for 2 big wins at home. WTTV's Dave Griffiths is keeping an eye on the Irish for us. Dave.
Back-to-back wins for Notre Dame now. The Irish stormed past Howard by 29. Final 79-50 Tuesday evening in South Bend. Leading the way was John Mooney, a game-high 18 points. Also 16 rebounds gave the senior forward his second double-double of the season. Mooney was far from the only one to do damage to the Bison, though. As a team, the Irish shot better than 50% from the field, while holding Howard to just near 30%. Points in the paint, dominant. A 26-4 Notre Dame advantage. Add to that stat an 8-0 mark in second chance points, and you see the Irish had their way close to the basket. Never in doubt either. Notre Dame started the game on a 7-0 run, led by 20 at the half and by as many as 34 in the second half. The bench helped out mightily, too, with 28 points.
They like playing together. Again, you know, when you have 22 assists, you're moving the ball a little bit, and it's a team you should beat and handle, and, you know, I'm glad we did that. So hopefully we can do that the rest of the month.
Looking for somewhere to improve? Well, Notre Dame hit just 6 of their 23 three-point attempts. Doubt Mike Bray will be happy with a long-distance rate close to 25% for this season. Up next, the Irish host Marshall Friday night at the Joyce Center. Covering Notre Dame, I'm Dave Griffiths.
Thanks a lot there. Notre Dame staying in South Bend, like you said, for the next 2 games, taking on the Thundering Herd of Marshall and then hosting the Presbyterian Blue Hose. After that one on Monday, also at 7. The Miami Hurricanes, they lost their opener. No other way to say this. To Louisville last week. Louisville just rolled over. But then they bounced back to win 2 of their next 2 games over a couple of in-state rivals. On Friday, Miami hosted Florida Atlantic and beat the Owls 74-60. Eds guard Chris Light pacing the Hurricanes with 15 points. Then on Tuesday, Miami traveled up to Orlando and beat up on UCF by 9. It was another balanced scoring night with Cameron McGusty leading the way for the Hurricanes. He had 17 points in that one. Up next for the Canes, it's a Saturday matinee against Quinnipiac. That game tips at 2. And then Miami will travel to Charleston, South Carolina for the Charleston Classic, where they'll take on Missouri State next Thursday. It's an early tip-off there, 11:30 a.m. Make sure you get up for that one. Now, we've already seen some movement in the rankings, and you can bet next week we're going to see even more movement, and that means a change in the odds. So to make sense of all this, we're going to bring in Jason Logan from Covers.com. Jason, welcome back. And I got to ask, how did you do last week on your picks, my friend?
I tread a little lightly with my college basketball picks early on, I will say, though. I went with Michigan State in that big opener, and they let me down. So
now, just recently, we saw #1 Kentucky get taken down by mid-major Evansville, which was, to me, the craziest thing I had seen this year. Now, basketball season is still young, but we got some ACC schools that are having some scares, too. FIU put one into NC State. Is there anything coming up this weekend, smaller schools that could possibly jump up and take out one of these ACC schools of ours?
Yeah, well, Boston College is no Kentucky, but they should not tread lightly when they take on the Belmont Bruins this Saturday. You may recognize Belmont from brackets past out of the Ohio Valley Conference. They knocked off Temple in the play-in game of that first four game in the tournament last year, and then they almost knocked off Maryland in the round of 64. The Bruins have a new head coach in Casey Alexander, but they're still one of these up-tempo, high-octane teams. They have a ton of young scoring talent. Last year, they finished second in the country in points per game, and it kind of clashes with Boston College's more defense-sounded game right now. So Belmont could put a scare in those Eagles this weekend.
Now, speaking of a squad that relies heavily on its defense, Virginia is playing Columbia. Now, the Lions, they came within tenths of a second of taking down Wake Forest, and Virginia going in there, like you said, defensive-minded team, not big on scoring. Exactly what are Tony Bennett and the crew going to have to do to make sure that they don't have the kind of a problem Wake Forest did where they had to hit a last-second buzzer beater?
Yeah, you don't want to take Columbia's 1-2 record too seriously, because those two losses that they had, both of them came by 2 points. Twin 65-63 scores here. The focus for Virginia has to be slowing down guard Mike Smith. He missed most of last year for Columbia, but he's back. He's averaging 21 points per game. And, of course, the defense is the main focal point for the Cavs. They've held opponents to just 34 points here to start the season. But offensively they have really, really struggled. They're shooting just 39% from the floor, just 8 for 50 from beyond the arc right now, and that was one of their strengths last year. This is a team that was among the top 3-point shooting teams in the country, hitting almost 40% of their looks from beyond the arc. So the offense has to really kind of worry Tony Bennett.
8 for 50, that's going ice cold there. Now, to see these two teams get back together it does my heart proud. I was actually privileged to see a couple of backyard brawls between West Virginia and Pitt. I've got a shirt that says, well, I'm not going to tell you what that shirt says. It's safe to say it wasn't nice to Pitt. But to see these two former Big East rivalries rekindle this thing is awesome. And when you get two rivalry schools like this together, what can people, maybe place a wager on this game expect, if you will? I mean, do you look at records? Do you look at past? How do you map this thing out?
Yeah, sometimes when it comes to these classic rivalries, the cliche is take all the stats and the records and throw them out the window. But you kind of have to do that in a way. There's a little more fire on the floor, and sometimes that can lend some value to maybe the underdog or the road team here. And we've seen a kind of similar trend between these two teams. They kind of rekindled this rivalry the last 2 years, but going back to their Big East days, the underdog is actually 3-0-1 against the spread in the last 4 meetings between these teams. And Bob Huggins, the legendary West Virginia coach, not a great record against Pitt in his 13 meetings, just 6-7 straight up right there. So there may be some value with the underdog. We'll see what Pitt can do this week playing host.
Making sense of it all. Jason Logan from Covers.com. Thanks for hanging out with us. All right, be sure to come back again next week. Wait a minute, we're done? That's it? No, we got to have more basketball. Next week, we're talking about Georgia Tech's trip to Georgia. Pitt's game against West Virginia, like we just talked about. We'll also take a look ahead at the big November tournaments like the Maui Invitational and the Battle for Atlantis. Yes, that's right. It is all coming up. I cannot believe we are done. We don't have any more basketball. Any more to talk about? I guess we got to start playing games now. Been a ton of fun. See you all back here next Thursday, 7 p.m. right here on CBS17.com or anywhere that you get your next star stations. It's been a pleasure. This is Chase for the Championship. I'm Chris Clark. Until next time.